r/explain like M5. Defiant Attention 29 says. Explain like I'm 5 how EV batteries are actually doing good for us. I personally think that EV cars and wind/solar are the future to our climate crisis and overall survival. My husband constantly shoots down any and all reasoning for EV cars because of their batteries. At first it was what's going to happen when it dies. Well, I then looked up and explained about the recycling process. He shot that down with telling me that making them is what the problem is. Apparently mining for the resources is just as bad as mining for oil. Can someone help me understand this and actually make this make sense? Edit. Thank you all for the swift replies. I have really appreciated all of you takes. I have read him some comments and it seems his tone may have changed. You all are amazing. Again, thank you for helping me understand. Flying Circus Dog says. The most obvious advantage is that EVs emit less carbon and greenhouse gases over the life of the vehicle. Even using coal power to charge an EV is still less polluting than a conventional gas engine car. There are scientific reasons for this that go far past explain like I'm 5, but in summary, giant power plant sized engines are more efficient than tiny car engines. Mining for batteries isn't good, but neither is constantly drilling for oil. Plenty of environmental damage has been done because we need more and more fuel. And like you mentioned, many parts of a car battery can be recycled. Frogleaper says. My take is that, by centralizing the fuel to power our vehicles, we can optimize one power grid instead of 200-meter cars all having their own power generation systems. For example, if we decide to invest in solar or nuclear or fusion, then suddenly driving has little effect on the environment. MePhone 514 says. There are currently 2 ways to obtain lithium: spodumene, hard rock mining, and brinning. Brinning is a relatively eco-friendly process as it uses water and concentrates lithium through solar evaporation. A sizable portion of the world's lithium is located in South America, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and it's extracted through brinning. Hard rock mining is indeed as damaging for the environment as mining for iron ore, gold, etc. However, the carbon footprint of a BEV is orders of magnitude smaller than an ICE counterpart and batteries can be recycled. Cleaner air and less noise pollution in urban environments are major advantages with BEV. Battery stationary grid storage from using old lithium batteries can also alleviate strain on the electrical grid during peak hours. r/explain like M5. Tax Fraud 777 says. Explain like I'm 5, how can black holes remain after proton decay if their mass is from matter, that is, protons? Roger Rabbit says. Once matter crosses the event horizon, the bright white ring around the black hole, it can never escape. What happens to matter after it crosses that point, no one knows for certain. What we see is the photons trapped in the accretion disk that are being flung outwards by the insane force of the spin from the black hole. In terms of how they can persist for so long, they are more dense than our sun by a large factor, so a black hole could lose the matter equal to 10 Earths a second, and it would account for maybe 0.000001% of its matter. Abayo 2010 says. Protons decay is a guess that we have exactly 0 experimental evidence of, with a lot of math behind it, so it's a very well thought out guess, but it's still a guess. Protons may very well not decay at all. Even if protons do decay, they would decay slow enough that the decrease in amount of protons that decayed from the Big Bang to now will still be a tiny portion of all protons in that black hole. We know the lifetime of protons to be at least 10⁻34 years. As in if it is less, we will observed it in our experiments. Even if all the mass in a black hole is protons, and they all decayed, it'll decay into particles and energy, the former still has mass. Energy exerts exactly as much gravity as the mass that transformed from, So even if all the mass in a black hole turned into energy, the black hole would still be the exact same. R/explain like in 5. Nguyen 2525 says. Explain like I'm 5. Why does the standard tax deduction exists? Therabi 74 says. For me. I don't want to have to itemize. I don't want to save receipts. Frick these deductions. The standard deduction is, so I don't spend that much more time every year giving the eyes free labor doing its job. Jazzada says. This is a us thing, yes? Rain Makajma says. Simply, if 10,000 average Americans took a complete look at their deductions, and you made a list of their total deductions, it would be within a close enough percent of the standard deduction, factoring in things like dependents and such for enough people, that it's a reasonable assessment for enough people. If you think about the work it takes the eyes to work through a ton of real itemized returns vs standard deductions, the labor alone makes it make sense to have the option. It works out in some people's favor. For most people it's a wash, but super easy, and for the people it doesn't make sense for, they can still itemize deductions. Too long. Didn't read. It streamlines the process by rounding a lot. Angela Rulas Cheel says. Pretty much everyone is going to qualify for some exemptions. Rather than requiring everyone to do all the paperwork, and then having the government have to review all that paperwork, they estimate what the average person would have, and just give that to everyone. Most people can't beat it. If you can choose to prove it. It makes the paperwork faster, easier, and less burdensome. R/explain like I'm 5. Sifrin says. Explain like I'm 5. Why is the shortest day of the year not the coldest? The winter solstice is the shortest day of the year. Here in the northern hemisphere, that falls on December 21st. Since the sun is the primary source of all heat on the planet, I would think that the day with the least sun is the coldest. But in my experience it is colder in January or February on average, even though there is more sunlight in these months. I notice a similar trend in the summer, where August seems to be the hottest month. Is the overall temperature a lagging effect of the amount of sunlight? Snomamus Jellies 1083 says. Turn off the heater in your house. How long until the house gets cold? As Lamington says. Get a 2L bottle and half fill it with water. Now hold it horizontally and start tilting it one way, then the other, in smooth motions. You'll notice after the first few tilts that the majority of the water will not hit either end when it's at its lowest tilt, but rather when that end is quarter to halfway upward. It's the same with the Earth's tilt and the weather. Once the Earth is at the equinox and starts to tilt the other way, it takes time for the weather to catch up. Fire says. Imagine you're the Earth. Just because you spent 10 seconds in the freezer doesn't mean you won't cool down even more standing in the yak. Peter Horvath says. Imagine you cook a pot of water and your cooker has settings from 1 to 5. Setting 1 is already a turned on position but very low. It's a very large open pot that is cooling down by evaporation, and interestingly, the evaporation, the cooling, is in balance with the heating at the stove setting of 3. It obviously means that at each settings 4 and 5 the pot is getting warmer, at 3 it remains the same, and at 2 and 1 it's getting colder, because the heat coming in is less than the heat lost. Now imagine that you have a cycle of pot heating like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4-5 point. When is the pot the coldest? At setting 1. No, because setting 2 follows setting 1, and although setting 1 is when the cooling speed is the fastest, setting 2 still results in cooling of the pot. In fact, the pot is the coldest at the end of setting 2 when the setting is already raising, and through setting 3. The pots start getting warmer when you reach stove setting 4. R/explain like I'm 5. Skidrow6969 says. Explain like I'm 5. What is purpose of silent letters? Why can't words be spelt without these silent letters? Egg, psychology, Psalm, det. Krausepeanut0 says. Usually each syllable is like part of a different word in Latin or some language, and when you combine them, you get new words. Tiralama says. Language change over time. In some languages, the spelling is regularly updated to reflect change in pronunciation. See spelling reforms. In other languages, the spelling is kept. There's a choice between A. Easier to learn to write or write today, since you can use pronunciation to aid spelling, or B. Easier to read old text, since the spelling is the same. Dvorath Explorer says. The letters didn't used to be silent. People just started saying those words wrong without the power to change the dictionary. This applies not only to silent letters but even vowels. Night was pronounced Kunigthit. Iroquois Bliskin LJG says. Most silent letters weren't always silent, they just became silent over time as language evolved. Spin81 says. Who says they can't? If everyone omits them, they'll go away in a few decades. That's not going to happen very likely, but it could. New words are made, and old words fade into oblivion every year. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.